Hey, I'm Ankita,
And this is Nalini.
and you are tuned in to Prickly Pears, the podcast where we celebrate uninhibited brown women and their prickly points of view. This is season 2. We're talking about everything related to purpose, and I'm really excited about our guest today. She's someone I have known for many years, and probably the only person I know who has spent a lot of time thinking deeply about questions related to purpose. So, Ananya, do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners today?
I think I want to say the only thing that qualifies me to be talking to you on this podcast is because I've thought a lot about it today because I'm not half as accomplished as the previous guests who've been here. So thanks a lot for inviting me. How do I introduce myself? I am born and raised in India, but I feel like a global citizen now, having worked and lived in so many different countries of the world. I am a professional who believes in bringing out the highest potential of people because that's what I do for a living. I work at Unilever in HR for the past 15 years. I'm an adventurer because if I wasn't in a full-time job, I would probably just be traveling all over the world. I keep account of all the countries I visit. I literally have an Excel sheet. The count is around 55 or something now. I'm also a part-time self-proclaimed alternative medicine doctor. I probably shouldn't say doctor because I give unsolicited advice to my family about what spices they should eat, what teas they should drink, how they should have a better dump in the morning. That's because I actually trained myself in Ayurvedic health counseling a few years ago. I spent some time studying on the side. I'm married and I believe in the power of love and two people coming together from different backgrounds and growing together. My husband is a Jewish American man. So yeah, I would say I'm like an inclusive, loving, global citizen, adventurous, health, fitness enthusiast. Of course, all this sounds very great, but I have a lot of things that are not so nice about me, and I'm sure we'll talk about that during the course of the conversation.
There are so many things about you that I didn't know that I learned today, and I wonder what else I'll discover. But before we jump into anything else, Ananya, how do you define purpose?
A few years ago, I dragged my family to Japan, and I've told you about this earlier, Ankita, because I read this book called Ikigai, which talks about this island of Okinawa, which is one of the world's top three blue zones. And blue zones are places where the maximum number of centenarians live on the planet, people who live beyond 100 years of age. And so I dragged my parents and husband to this little island of Okinawa in Japan and somehow found about 10 to 15 really old people, like 95 years plus people, to meet us for 2 days and help us understand what made them live so long. And I've been kind of obsessed with this question since I would say I got out of high school, where you come out of 12th grade and you're like, okay, what am I supposed to study in college? Am I supposed to be an engineer, doctor, economics? That was the moment where I took a step back and I was like, hey, what am I meant to do on this planet? And I think the way I would define purpose is a bit like the Japanese do, which is, your reason for existence, the reason why you are. Interestingly, India, where we come from, also has a very deep rooted philosophy around dharma. And I'm sure you would have explored that in your previous episodes. But basically says each of us has an inherent responsibility that we're born with towards ourselves, towards the world that we live in. And the whole point of life is to kind of live that dharma. So yeah, I think I would define purpose as a combination of ikigai and dharma, which is the reason for your existence and your responsibility on the
At
planet.
this point, usually we ask everyone if they think they've found their purpose and what it is. So I will ask you to answer that question. But before we get into that, what did you learn from the 2 days and the many conversations that you had with everyone in Japan?
Yeah, no, it was actually a lot of those meetings were so inspiring because like we met a 99-year-old man who ran a marathon a few months before he met us and he showed us a picture of it. There was a lady who was doing embroidery at the age of some 96. I mean, most people don't have great vision at that age. And there were many others playing some musical instrument. And I think what was pretty obvious is that they were keeping themselves busy. and they were keeping themselves busy with something that sparked joy for them. But I would also say it wasn't some dreamy trip where we met, amazing old people. But there were also some depressing people who we met, and it just goes to show that life can be either way depending on what you make of it. I think the main learnings we had were around exercise because literally all of them did all their house chores themselves, gardening, cleaning, cooking. They didn't have help. That was one big learning. The second big learning was around their meals. They did eat a very healthy diet, which is inherent to Japanese culture. Third big learning was around relationships and community. They have a very good system of supporting each other, of lending money to each other, being there for each other in troubled times. They literally have in each municipality like a center where the older people go and meet each other and have events and dance competitions, etc. So there's a lot of sense of community and friendship that keeps them healthy and young. The fourth and the most important was that each of them had something that was really, like making them come out of bed every morning and wanting to go out there in the world and do something. Like our guide through the 2 days was himself 89 years old. That was his ikigai, to be the guide who makes people meet old people, and he was the manager of the Old People Association of Okinawa, and it was really really fascinating to see how energized and youthful most of them were.
But there were unhappy people, which is like the first time I'm hearing that someone in a blue zone was unhappy and depressed, because, all the messaging that you get on social media and documentaries is the other way around. So it's not enough to be in a blue zone. Like, you need to, happipiness is your internal responsibility.
Absolutely, Nalini, you really hit the nail on its head. I also went with a very idealistic picture of what it would be, but there were some conversations which left us very depressed. Most of them were very inspiring, but some of them were very depressing. So yeah, it could go either way.
Ananya, tell us, have you found your purpose?
I think I have found an articulation of my purpose, and I think most of us, without having to think about it, already live our purpose. As I mentioned, I've been kind of obsessed with this question of, okay, what am I meant to do? Even when I was deciding what to study in college, I was like, but what am I really meant to do? I went to a counselor to do an aptitude test, and I was always interested in decoding, okay, how does the unique strengths or weaknesses that I have as a human being fit into the world, and where do I best fit as the puzzle piece? And I've been on this journey, I think this, during my corporate career. Pretty much when I was at a very healthy peak of it, I decided to take a sabbatical. And what's interesting is that I work at a company which was very supportive. Of course, initially when I said I'm going to take a sabbatical, people were like, okay, you're not having a baby, you're not getting married, you don't have a health issue, what is this sabbatical? And I had to explain this is a self-discovery sabbatical where I'm going to go, dig deeper into who I am beyond my, corporate identity, beyond being a Unilever leader or employee. And that journey, I think, of taking a sabbatical still continues to be the best gift I ever gave to myself. I came back so enriched with additional insights about who I am, what I like, what I don't like, what my natural preferences are, what my essence is. And also, I learned so much more about the world because what I did was basically I crafted my sabbatical around my hobbies and interests. So I spent 3 months just traveling to all the bucket list countries which I could afford with all my savings because I was obviously not getting paid at the time. I taught at a school in South India 3 months. I stayed in an ashram and did some higher level yoga courses, and I've been doing yoga for over 20 years. So I had a desire to go do some intense programs, be in silence, etc. So I did that. I also did some mountaineering, climbed up to Mount Everest base camp, 2 week, pretty intense physical, mental, emotional journey. So really, I tried to push the limits of what makes me me and truly explore and discover what are the other facets to myself through these experiences and interests. Long story cut short, what I'm trying to say is that I've always been curious, but also what happened simultaneously is that I work at a company that takes leadership development very seriously. And Unilever a few years ago launched this workshop called Discover Your Purpose Workshop. And it was tailor made for what I had been going through. And I already had a almost a diary full of insights because I've been noting down what I call downloads. Like when you just like when you're meditating or in the shower, you get this insight or voice or idea. I call it download. I walked into this workshop and it was beautiful because what it helped me do is gather all of those insights and put them into a statement. And in this workshop, I realized that basically there are many insights that all of us have about ourselves and what we're good at and what we're naturally kind of have a proclivity towards. But it helped me bucket all of this into kind of three big themes of my personality. One I discovered was something around pushing boundaries, achieve the maximum possible. This second big theme was around reflection, really being able to pause and be still and take a very objective view on something. And I'll maybe share some examples in a bit, but I have a big kind of inner world and imagination because I've been an only child. And the reflection is a very big theme of my purpose. And the third one was around authenticity. And I basically discovered that these are the kind of three big building blocks of my purpose. And each of them had like a story that goes back in my life that helped me see that that is actually a big theme across different situations. First sign of or story that always I get reminded of related to my discovery of my purpose is I'm an only child, and those of you who are only child will know that when you don't have a sibling, you're pretty much all by yourself with your parents. And so when I was young, about 10 years old, in the evenings after coming back from school, when my parents would be either having their tea or resting or whatever, I would sneak out in the early evening, late afternoon into a mangrove that was right across our house. We used to live in the outskirts of Calcutta. My dad was in the army, so we had this really big house, big garden, mangrove in the front, and with tons of trees and a pond and all of that. So I would sneak out of the house and climb these trees, and like every day find a new branch and find a new branch to sit on and see the view. And one day, as I was climbing down the tree, I saw a dead insect, and it was beautiful. It was like it had literally had the colors of the rainbow, and it was lying dead on this leaf. And I picked it up, and I was so fascinated by just the sheer beauty of nature. And I brought it back home, and I preserved it carefully between my notebook, and I was just thinking about it, how beautiful could creation be. And then it kind of became a routine. Every day I would sneak out of the house, go into the forest, and invariably come back with a dead insect. I wasn't killing them, I was finding dead ones. And soon I had this collection of 150, 200 insects. And obviously, everybody thought I was really weird, but to me, this was just absolutely normal because what else do you do when you find these dead insects? And in my free time, I obviously had by then found a way to mummify them and preserve them. And I had this really nice collection, and I would show it to my friends and their parents when they would visit us. But I think in my free time, when I would look at this collection, I would marvel at how unique each one was. I had over 200 of them, but no two insects were the same. Each one had a different design, color, shape. Something was totally different. And when you look at a dead insect, you wonder, what kind of life they've lived. And so I spent a lot of time in this kind of reflection mode and thinking about the uniqueness of these insects. And I've noticed that I always get reminded of this story because I think one of the main themes of my style and personality is something around honesty and authenticity. I can't help but be myself. Even, as a leader for my team, I've always encouraged people to just be themselves. And there's a big theme around authenticity that lies hidden away in that story. I think in the pushing the boundaries story that I have that kind of takes me back is actually my sabbatical story. I kind of shared that in the beginning, so I won't go into it. But I have been quite passionate about trying to push myself and those around me to discover beyond the boundaries of what they know, to go into the unknown. This is evident in, of course, not just the kind of adventurous career moves I've made, but also the kind of marriage I have. I think it does show up in all kinds of work that I do.
But tell me, Ananya, before you go to the third thing, in the sabbatical, eventually what came out of it. I want like our listeners to also appreciate the fact that if you do take a sabbatical, for example, even I took a what I call a maternity leave, which is like for me because I was not pregnant, but I just took a leave to figure out stuff in life. But I didn't come back with much. I just needed that time. I realized that to think things through, reflect, figure out what you want in life. But I didn't come up with anything concrete out of that vacation, and I didn't even plan it as well as you did. So tell me, did you have a few things coming out of that sabbatical that were different about you as you went back in, or what was it that was different?
So I think it's a great question, and it's easier to answer looking backwards because just when I came back, I don't think what I will say now was as clear to me. Of course, I had tons of notes and diaries. I think it gave me a few things. First thing I would say is an understanding of what I want from my career because I was always kind of confused. Should I be in HR? Should I move to something else? Do I want to start my own company someday? Should I be in marketing? Like all these kind of questions, and it'll take a whole few minutes to explain, what those realizations were. But during the course of the sabbatical, some seeds were sown that helped me understand then onwards choices that I made in the roles I did or the kinds of work I did in my roles was kind of defined by some of those seeds. Secondly, it made me very clear on the kind of spouse I would want to have, person I would want to marry. I think during such self discovery experiences, you understand a lot about what makes you happy, what are your triggers, what do you really value in your life, and therefore what kind of companion would help you blossom. And I think also what self discovery does is, it makes you a little bit more confident about who you are, and so it is easier to then attract the right kind of companion once you are a little bit more sure about what you want. So I think that's another thing. And literally after the sabbatical, couple of years later, I got married. I mean, I think I can find the seed in my sabbatical.
So did you meet your husband in the sabbatical?
No, we met much before, but the click happened later. So that was the second thing I think I got. The third thing, I think I understand a little bit better about my passions. I used to always be really obsessed with like the signals that the body gives you. I would be like always asking people, did you poop well? What did you eat? Like these kind of weird things. And I would not know what does this really mean? Why am I thinking about this? And during the course of the sabbatical, obviously I met some people. I understood more about Ayurveda, and that led me to find schools where I could study it more. And soon after the sabbatical, when I came back to work, I also signed up to study Ayurveda for the next few years. Yeah, I would say it's not like some bombastic, life changing, oh, this happened after my sabbatical. And I don't even think we should put that kind of pressure on a poor little sabbatical. In summary, it is seeds that are sown that you can see as fruits many years down the line. And only now, when I look back, can I connect the dots and be like, oh, that's when I actually understood this thing.
That's amazing. I will let you get back to your third thing now.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I was talking about was authenticity and the insect collection. The second one was pushing boundaries. And the third one is reflection. So authenticity, pushing boundaries, reflection. And I think reflection and realization is the kind of third theme. And this goes back to a little bit of a vulnerable moment in my life. Being an only child and not having siblings, when something happens to your parents and their health, it's a really scary thing. And many years ago, my mom was quite unwell and she was in hospital, and the doctors couldn't really figure out the cause. And I remember I had just started working. I flew back home, and it was a pretty scary 10 days or so, and all kinds of scary tests being done. And thankfully, everything was fine at the end. She was fine, she is fine, touch wood. But it left me feeling very, very alone. And it left me feeling really paranoid about health and about life. And I came back to work. I had just started working a few months ago, and literally a month later, my mom gave me a call and said, "Can you come back home because Smike, our dog, has gotten paralyzed." Those of you who are listening who are only children will know that a dog or a pet for an only child is like a sibling. Thankfully, I had a very kind boss at the time who many years ago now, 15 years ago, let me fly back home and work from home for over a month. I had pretty much grown up with Smike, and he was my many things. And unfortunately, all the doctors we met said you need to put him down, and there is no hope for him to get better. He was a Dachshund, the small sausage dogs with small legs. And it was very tough because my parents were like, you decide. I had decided to get him, and so I have to decide what to do next. And it was really overwhelming to feel like, hey, I'm like this little girl and I'm supposed to decide what happens to this piece of life, whether when it dies, and how we do that. It sounds a bit too onerous. And I read a lot of blogs, I spoke to a lot of people, and of course now many more people have pets and go through this thing. And I really struggled with this decision. I refused to give up on him. I kind of wore gloves and pulled out his urine every few minutes for hours, and because he had lost bladder control, and did everything to kind of keep him alive. And there was this one day where I was working on my laptop and he was sitting next to me in the balcony, and he was looking straight into my eyes and tears were rolling down his face. And in that moment, I saw it in his eyes that he was ready, and I was supposed to make the decision. So we took him to the vet 2 days later, and in those 2 days, I gave him the best possible 2 days of his life with all the things that he loved, all the places that he loved to go to, sticking his head outside the window while driving in a car, and his favorite park, his favorite food, his favorite friends. I like the two perfect days of his life. And then we took him to the doctor, and he was in my lap when they inject that fluid which takes them out. And it was a very profound moment for me. That moment actually the beginning of my purpose journey in a very concrete way, because I saw in one moment Mike was alive, my dog in my lap, and in the next moment his eyes were blank and he was gone. There was just this body lying in my lap. And in that moment, I realized the power of death and how short life is. And yes, we all, hear about people dying and have our loved ones go through scary situations. But I literally had something that was alive in my lap and then leave the next moment. And I can't unsee that moment. And so I ever since have made death very like a centerpiece in my life, and which is what makes me really impatient, which is what makes me really kind of that realization that death is the biggest reality of our life made me get on the spiritual path, intensify my kind of meditation, yoga, all these things that I was doing. And I, in that moment, also realized the power of realizations. And I think this is the ultimate realization that we as human beings can have. But then many other stories to share, but then I realized that there are many more realizations that I have had and that I have seen others around me have. And as I share a lot of my stories, and in that purpose workshop, basically you share stories with each other, I realized that there's a theme of realization that's coming through, like in either me having a realization or me helping someone else have a realization. And every time someone or me have a realization, we seem to move to like the next level of our growth or evolution. And so, with these three themes of pushing boundaries, authenticity, realization, and reflection, I strung together a sentence that I now can say is my purpose statement. And how I articulate it is basically to maximize lives through truth seeking journeys. I think by now it will probably make sense to you that seeing Smike die in my lap really makes me really impatient to maximize my life, to maximize everybody else's life, because life is so short and it's so precious. Truth seeking journeys are nothing but realizations. They are these journeys we take into the unknown. Just like I was climbing the forest outside my house, going into the unknown, finding an insect, finding a discovery every day to be enlightened about something. And I believe that when each of us has this unique set of realizations that we do, we grow to our highest level of evolution. And that's how we maximize our lives, is by growing to the fullest. And of course, I get to do a lot of this in my job. Being in HR, you do play with people's potential, people's development, putting people in the right jobs based on who they are. But also, I get to do it in many other ways in just my daily life with my husband, with my parents, with my friends. And I really see a few years ago, I would be very anxious. Okay, so how am I really living my purpose? But I realize now that the purpose doesn't change, the manifestation of the purpose changes. You do the same thing, but you do it across different situations in different contexts. So I do it a certain way in my work, I do it a certain way when I'm pestering people about their poop. So the manifestation of it might change, but what I'm actually still doing is helping people maximize lives through truth seeking journey. That's a long answer to your question.
Ananya, you're probably the only person I know who looks at a dead insect and wonders about the life they've lived.
And at the age
Yeah.
that she was.
I have to say, at one point of time, you said that everyone's already living their purpose in one way or the other. One of the questions that we are exploring through our conversations is, does everyone really need to bottom out their purpose statement? Does everyone need a purpose statement? Does everyone need to spend time thinking about it?
Well, the ultimate manifestation of my purpose is actually to help people find their purpose, because that is the ultimate truth seeking journey, is to figure out what you're meant to do. You could have a truth seeking journey about your health or your house or your finances or your whatever, but the ultimate realization is about what you're meant to do. So, yeah, I think I'm in the camp that everybody should spend some time
So your
on
team
this.
Nalini.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Because, yeah, we didn't tell you this. The whole season, we have been Team Ankita or Team Nalini based on
Oh.
like whether you're on camp purpose and like everyone needs it, or whether you just, it's okay to float in life and find what makes you happy and gives you joy at that particular time. Those are the two
But
camps.
that's pretty much the same thing we both are saying, right?
it is slightly different in the sense that I wouldn't get upset over the fact that I don't have my purpose mapped out. Each activity could have its own purpose, but I wouldn't burden myself with the whole thing of, oh, what is my purpose in life? Do I need I wouldn't give that word as much attention as the current media or the word everyone else gives it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely team Nalini, but I agree with you, Ankita, that I think there is no need to come up with a statement and like be very like kind of like, oh, this is my purpose, so this is what I should do. I think that really kills the spirit of what dharma truly is. It's something that flows naturally. Articulating it definitely helps, and I think being in Japan and seeing people being able to articulate it and then living long, I don't know, there seems to be a correlation between well-being and an articulated purpose. So we'll see, but yeah, I don't agree that there should be anxiety around it. I have had years where I've been a bit like anxious, so maybe I'm preaching to my younger self. To me, the most important piece of work to be done on this planet is of self-discovery.
Do you have recommendations for people who are very early on in their journey of discovering purpose, or who are probably sitting around like me wondering if they should embark on these truth seeking journeys?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I often talk about purpose, and I share some of these starters that you or appetizers. The first one I would say is tell some important stories from your life to your loved one. Find anybody who just feels safe. Share two, three key stories from your life, kind of the way I just did. It doesn't have to be a particular question or a particular story, just one or two stories, two, three stories that really have shaped you. That's one thing that I've seen really gives you a lot of clues. The second thing that I would say is to follow your joy, which is kind of what I did in my sabbatical. I think following what makes you happy and what sparks something in you is always an indication of you being on the right track, and it often gives you clues about what your purpose might be. The third thing I would say is I found that journaling and meditation and nature really helps. So I like to think, and maybe that's not always a good thing because I do tend to overthink. But I think thinking, meditating, processing, being with nature, creating some space for some insights and downloads to happen. So yeah, I think I would say those are my two, three things. Above all else, I think even though we're talking about a lofty topic like purpose, I think what I've realized is that it's not possible to be thinking or talking about this until you have your basics sorted. So, and the basic departments are health, money, love. I don't think, I mean, it's almost like the Maslow's hierarchy of self discovery. You can't really move up the chain to talk or think about purpose, I believe.
I totally agree with you that thinking about purpose and even having this conversation is such a privilege, because so many people out there don't even have the time or bandwidth or energy or like even mind space to think about this, because they're so busy taking care of like other people in their life or even their own self, and forget about their own self, because purpose only comes after you have taken care of yourself in all. So like self-care in financial, physical, like all of those ways. So yeah, all the reading that we've done this season while shooting is, it has pointed at least to that self-care, and then like going on to find your North Star is definitely, like, if you don't have the self-care in place, then that won't be. My other really big takeaway from today, Ananya, and I know we're coming at an end, Ankita, I can see the ticker, but one big takeaway is that you can take a sabbatical, you can go on a self-discovery journey, and yet come back to the same job and the same company that you had as a different person and approaching the same thing differently. Because this season we've spoken to so many people who made drastic changes in their life when they took a pause and decided that this was not for them. But you're the first one, and I think like this is so inspiring for not just me and Ankita, but like for many of our listeners, because not enough people have the luxury to make those changes in life as well. And if you can really find a purpose in what you already have, what could be better than that? And not just your job, but even your daily life, as you said, it's quite a revelation. So thank you for sharing.
On that note, I'm going to get us out of here. Ananya, thank you so much for hopping on. I know schedules have been crazy, but on behalf of Prickly Pears, Ananya, and Nalini, this is Ankita, and we are out.